We'll move to the consent agenda items. These are agenda items that represent matters the board may approve without detailed discussion. Any item on the consent agenda may be removed for separate discussion as an action item upon request by the superintendent or any board member. The board has received the supporting information on all items prior to action on the consent item. Just for the public's sake, I'll read through them real quick. Minutes, treasurer's report, accounts payable register, programs, procedures, policies, human resource actions, student trips, curriculum, textbooks, instructional materials, and then miscellaneous things such as Head Start, Sister City Delegation, adult meal price increase, etc. Does anybody want to pull off an item or have further discussion about any one of these items on the consent agenda?
I'd like to have some discussion around textbooks in Section G, discussion around H6 change orders, and H7A benefit district. Some comments.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have items that we need to have a little further discussion on? If not, then let's move to these items that Mr. Churchman has indicated. Item G, curriculum, textbooks, instructional materials. Mr. Churchman?
And just a clarification, in some of the documentation it talks about accepting bids, and other feedback is we don't bid textbooks. If I could get some clarification on that, please.
There may be some confusion in that the form that we're asked to fill out for board reports has the word bid on it, and we should be deleting that word, and I think a couple of times when that report is generated, the word bid is left on there. We do enter into discussions once a textbook has been selected based on criteria such as aligning with the curriculum, but we do not bid textbooks. For example, we don't take all the health textbooks that are available on the market and bid to find the lowest cost. We first select the textbook that matches the board-adopted curriculum, the standards, the assessments, the expectations of the community. Then, once that has been selected by the board policy that's outlined in the board policy, then we go into negotiations. We discuss with those textbook companies if we can get a rate, if you will, on supplementary material, teacher resources. So I think part of it was that we were not deleting that word from the form because it's a generic form used for the summary. And we'll be deleting that in the future.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mr. Churchman.
And just a couple of comments. One, continue to be impressed with the management around the construction change orders. I think staff's doing a great process there. I do want to express concern around the transportation center as to the fact that that appears to be tracking inordinately higher than the other projects, and just ask that the staff look into what the root cause is behind that and make any kind of adjustments as necessary on it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions about the consent agenda?
There's one other one on the benefit district.
Sorry. Benefit district.
Just want to confirm the $205,000 that is our maximum exposure as a district, and in the event construction costs come in higher than what's projected, what would happen?
It's my understanding from talking with consultants and the folks at the city that this is the maximum amount that we would be assessed based upon a $2.3 million estimated construction cost. If the estimated construction cost were less, our assessment would be less. If the estimated construction cost were higher, there are a lot of options that occur, all of which we'd have to participate in. So to say it's a guaranteed maximum cost isn't totally true. At some point, one of the city's options may be just to absorb those costs and go ahead with the project. One of them may be to come back to the participants in the benefit district and ask for us to accept a higher assessment. I can tell you that there are a lot of contingencies and a lot of fees in their estimate to keep them from being over budget on bid day, just because there aren't a lot of pretty options that happen on that day. So I think the chances of that are very slim. We will be asked to participate in anything if it is more than this amount. In other words, we'll have a choice as to whether we want to move on or not with the project.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. If there are no further discussion, we would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Gilmore?
Second.
Second by Ms. Ashley. Any further discussion? Ms. Carpenter?
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Drummond?
Yes. Thank you. The motion passes. We'll move next to action items, bids, purchases, agreements, contracts, leases. First item is District Broker Consultant for Health and Dental Risk Management. I think Mr. Diener has a presentation for us to kind of help go through this and help us understand this better and the public to understand it better. It's a very complicated business, isn't it?
Yes. Thank you very much. This evening, like you said, we're looking at the benefit broker services a request for proposal. This process has been very lengthy. It started last fall when the professional counsel was looking at the services that are provided by our current broker, CBiz, and the desire to make sure that we were, in fact, receiving all the services that were available and that were not available to us, but also that we needed and deserved within our district. That process led to the desire to go out for a request for proposal. In the January board meeting, the board was provided with a board summary outlining that process for the request for proposal. And last month, then, we provided you additional information on where we were on that. Essentially, I'd like to point out some key items. Number one, that there have been 2 separate committees that have worked on this, not only the professional counsel committee, but a subcommittee made up of professional counsel members, other staff members in HR and the business department, 2 board members. I want to thank Ms. Ashley and Mr. Churchman for participating in that process. And also, at that time, we solicited the services of Mr. Bob Charlesworth to lead and oversee that whole process and bringing the expertise he has in that area to us. Mr. Charlesworth is our insurance advisor for the district. Another key process was an interview. And we, once it was narrowed down to 3 very capable vendors, we had an interview process where the subcommittee went out to these vendors' locations and were able to meet the key personalities that were going to be involved in providing the services to this particular as the client in that case. And those interview processes were very informative to us as far as learning to know something about those particular vendors and what they could offer to us.
Mr. Diener, could you talk about that just a minute? Was it a standardized process? In other words, each firm was asked the same, the criteria was the same for across all interviews?
Yes, you said that very well. And in fact, we're going to have, Bob is going to provide more of that detail in just 2 seconds.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Which is a great lead-in, because that was all I was going to say on the process, and lead into introducing Mr. Charlesworth, who's going to talk about some of the key evaluation criteria. Thank you.
Welcome, Bob.
Thank you for having me here. I want to make 2 comments, and then I'll address your question, Mr. Parker. My role here is a facilitator for the school district, has been for about 16 years now, and this process was a very interesting process and very detailed process. I think it boiled down to 4 issues regarding the purpose. And that was to help find a business partner that can assess the district for the future of their health benefit program, to have specific service criteria on which to base the broker services now and in the future, for the district to be able to monitor those services throughout the year, and from that, you can make a decision if they're providing them or not, and if not, you make a change. And also to provide full disclosure of those services and of their fees, which is very important. What I'd like to touch on here is some criteria that was included in the RFP. It was also included in your last month's board summary. And also, I'm going to walk through that, but also, Mr. Parker, to address your specific question. During the interview process where we actually went on site, I came up with a list of about 12 or 13 questions that were essentially the exact same questions to each of the vendors. There were a couple clarifications that we needed, so there were some differences, but essentially it was the same criteria to go through as far as those interview questions. Served 2 purposes. First was to make sure that we kept on an agenda, and also to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to understand exactly how the process was supposed to work and what they were supposed to do for the funds they were to receive. And I think that worked out very well to those that all attended. It was very complex. All 3 that we interviewed gave us all the time we wanted. We kept it very short, hour and a half. And then we got together afterwards to really hash out, what did we hear? What do you think is going to be the best fit for this school district? We established some criteria. Again, we're going to go over that next. How do you rank something like this? It is so subjective. It's very personable. We have asked a lot of service requirements of all of them. And bottom line is, they all can provide these services. Now, some may not be here local, some may not, most of them are. But the bottom line is they're all extremely capable firms. And I think as a facilitator, my job was to get the best to the table and then let it go from there. Let me just quickly walk through these evaluation criteria, if you will. There are 10 of them. The quality and quantity of similar services provided to public entities. Refer to the ones in the geographic area so we can call them and talk to them, and we did call references. Obviously, firm personnel, their background experience, in-house staff, what they have to contract with, who they use, and again, the ability to have some key support staff for both your clerical people here as well as the building facilitators as well. See if this works. There it goes. Again, we wanted to see the key and support staff in the local offices. And you think, well, why local offices? Well, obviously, I got called yesterday and was here in 15 minutes. I think it's important to have the ability, when needed, to do that if possible. Not necessarily required, but if possible. Their overall responses to this RFP, again, they all did a phenomenal job. Their scope of services that are in compliance with what we requested, and they all did that. Their stability as brokers, and they're top-notch brokers. All of them are just phenomenal. We were just so pleased to get them. Their costs and fees, including the contingency fees that we've talked about, and those were all disclosed to compare those. Again, those contingency fees are not impacting on the district's premium. They're paid by the insurance community as part of their overall administrative fees. And those specific fees do not impact your experience or your premiums. And then, of course, access to the insurance markets on a competitive basis. Comment was made, do we get insurance products now or do we get a broker now? Well, I think we get a broker first. And at that point, if you want to look at alternatives, you have that business partner, as I was talking about, to search for alternatives for the future. Yes,
Mr. Charles, a question on the fees.
Yes.
I don't work in the brokerage world, so make that very clear. Understand a little bit about fees and commissions. It's my understanding that the fees that a broker receives is contingent upon the volume of business that they bring to the carrier.
It can be, yes.
It can be. That's a part of the criteria. So if a broker is bringing a large volume of business to that carrier, then that carrier is going to, has the prerogative of initiating a fee structure for that brokerage firm based upon that volume.
That would be correct, and a lot of them even come into play. It says even based on the volume, it's based on a reducing schedule based on the premium of the individual account. In this case, we had one, in fact, the incumbent. Anything over $15 million in premium, there is no bonus. So in other words, and you're at 17 million, I understand, in the health benefit area. And so there is no, quote, other fees or additional fees available to them at that. I do have two other comments here real quick. The ability to help guide the district for the future. This was a huge issue. I think Larry Spots brought this up to a head. And who's going to lead us to the future? We have a phenomenal wellness program here. It's second to none that I've ever seen in all the clients we work with. And it's a model. And what can we do to help encourage that, help people get better, help them be cancer survivors, anything that they can do. We need to do better now so we don't have to pay the claims later on. And of course, their technical capabilities. And I got to tell you, the change in the broker environment the last 3 to 5 years has just been a blossom. The things that they can do internally, the staff that they have, their actuarial services that are available, their predictive modeling services that are available to you now. It's a wonderful tool to manage your health benefits for the future. And I think if we've done nothing else here, I think what we've done is outlined what the district's going to have for the future and how you're going to succeed, because it is such a large ticket item. Now, are there any questions that I can try and answer for you?
Thank you. Questions? Board members? Linda, you look like you're ready to form a question.
Oh.
No, I just comments by the two people that served from our board, if you would, please.
Well, I would echo Bob's comment in regard to our forward thinking in working with the broker who we might eventually select. I thought that was a critical factor and something that hasn't been addressed and hasn't been utilized in the past. And so we very definitely targeted our questions in that direction and, you know, said, think outside of the box as far as what they can do and what services they can provide for us. And I don't have a detailed list of what those services are, but maybe, Bob, you could comment on some of the things that we talked about specifically that the broker might be able to coordinate and provide for school district personnel.
What we have asked for, in fact, they've all responded to do the same thing, is we've asked them to be at least on site on every school facility at least once a year, not just enrollment. I want them to be able to come out and have people ask them a personal question if they're afraid to make a phone call. I want them to help with predictive modeling for the future. What can we do to get claims down? I want them to help us regarding our wellness program. What other services that they have available to this district that can help coordinate what you've got already. It's not just, it used to be just help do the renewal. That's just a little piece of the pie now. The numbers are the numbers. And you can arm wrestle with your insurer, whoever it is now for the future, regarding those numbers. But in reality, it's the ancillary service to help keep the numbers down that's going to be really the key, I think, to success.
Jim?
I would absolutely support what Rita said. To me, the key is that we have to really delineate in a definitive agreement as to what are the services that we're going to expect from whomever the broker is that we move forward. As we went to the presentations, we heard about a lot of innovative things that they can do and that they've committed to do for us. And I believe that it's incumbent upon us as a board to make sure that we have those services clearly documented and what our expectations will be, not only from a baseline, but from a going forward perspective, continuous improvement and continuing to improve the services to the district. And that being said, do we have CBIZ representatives here tonight?
Yes, sir, we do. And actually, you know, in fact, we've just started dialogue regarding their service agreement. And actually, you and I need to hook up, I guess, sometime next week maybe. But it just needs to be refined, and whoever we use. I mean, the addendum that we've been working on essentially mirrors what we want in the RFP and how they responded. And that's just, you know, you typically get a boilerplate agreement, and then you have to modify it from there. And I think any decision you make needs to be contingent on that agreement being acceptable to this district.
And can the CBIZ team stand up so everybody can see them? And I want to compliment the team on an outstanding job you did when we came to your facility. We definitely heard some innovative things, thought it was a first-class presentation. And hopefully you're in agreement that if we do move forward with you, it is contingent upon getting a definitive agreement, and that's a process that's very important and wouldn't want us to derail that relationship going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Mr. Parker?
Dr. All, and I appreciate what Mr. Churchman says about the service agreement and the level of service and our expectations in that regard. What's staff's role in this, and where's staff responsibility going to occur? In other words, who's going to make sure that it actually happens?
Well, first of all, Mr. Diener has been a lead person on this subcommittee work out of professional counsel, and it's his responsibility to help develop that agreement. And that would be the responsibility on our side in working with Bob Charlesworth and working with the broker to identify that and make that agreement. And then you're pointing to somebody. Who else are you pointing to? And Dr. Letcher. I'm sorry, over here. Dr. Letcher, another key person here, who is responsible for our Section 125 benefits and human resources, has also served on the committee and would be a lead person. Gary comes at it from the contractual basis and helping in that area, and then Dr. Letcher has not only the responsibility to be part of that, but also the day-to-day implementation, because it's his staff that deal with the services, the broker services that are provided to our employees. And to us as an employer. And so I think this is something that will be very important as he's moving forward, because it gives him an opportunity to be in a very clear position to have this mutually agreed upon service outline done as we move forward together.
And then monitors the execution.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one comment. Any other thoughts or comments? You said something earlier, Mr. Charlesworth, about the volatility of the environment that we're in at this point in time. I recall, as an old-timer, that back in, well, for many years, we didn't have a broker and seemed to do fine, and then we hit a hiccup in the road with financing and the complications of health insurance, and then we went in that direction and have had one ever since. I draw from your comments that this world has continued to change, even since those early days that we went with a broker, and that for us to even consider not going the broker route would be very difficult for us to manage all that's part of this big program now, then that has changed so much in the last 15 years.
Oh, I think you're exactly correct. I can remember probably 15 or 16 years ago, it was common to go direct to the insurance community, avoid of a broker, because they were viewed essentially as somebody that just got a renewal quote and away you went. But that has changed so much, especially in the last 3 to 5 years, that these brokers that we interviewed, they are investing in staff, they're investing in talent, and they have such relationships with these insurers. They understand, and the insurers understand it as well, that they bring a vast value to the table. The insurers cannot staff enough to come out and see you all the time. And they need expertise to bring them what's going on in the marketplace. What does their client need? And so it's a give and take is what it is. And it was, like I said, it was very common to go direct, save the commission. And the commissions on this piece is extremely a small percent. And why would you not take advantage of those services that are available, in-house legal, regarding benefit, FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and other issues like that? It would, in my opinion, I think that has changed dramatically. And I think it's, for most clients, not all clients, but for most clients, they prefer to use a broker.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Poland?
I've probably missed it. What's the length of this agreement?
Actually, it's a one-year agreement with annual renewable, and based on the sample that I have, there is actually no limit on it. It's like everything else. It's a board discretionary item. The broker is to give you all their figures as to what their fees are going to be for the next year early on, and also there's going to be some rating criteria on how they perform their service agreement, and that way your district will know early on if this is going to be acceptable or not. And I've been known to be fairly tacky at times, and I'll be that way right now. But if that broker is not performing as you deem fit, you will terminate that agreement at some point, and you would not include them in an RFP process if it's down the road. Otherwise, why would you do it? And so I think it's annually looked at. I really do.
Thank you.
But I don't want you doing this RFP every year, please. Not good.
Okay, other comments?
I think it's good in that, not every year, but it's good that we look at it periodically and review it. And Mr. Churchman certainly has been very pointed in the service agreement, and that we know what the expectations are, and our staff knows what is expected of. I think third-party administrator would be a better term that we should be using here, rather than a broker, that our third-party administrator is using, and that they are delivering on that part of that contract that they're supposed to be delivering on.
Exactly.
Good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Second item on action items is handheld computers. Any questions or comments anybody would like to make on that?
Well, this was an action item.
It's part of a group of bids purchases.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
We're still on it.
Okay.
I have one clarification question on that.
Sure.
Just why are we not getting any for Olathe North?
They're not at Forsyth. They're not, it's the other one.
I was just curious.
Olathe North is currently in the third year of their one-to-one initiative, and so they're not due for replacement until next year.
Great, thank you.
You'll be seeing this again in about a year.
Okay, thank you.
Number 3 was pulled for further clarification for computer tables, task chairs. Any questions or comments on this action item? 5th, transportation vehicles of secondary schools.
Quick question is,
Sure.
Reviewing the spec, it looked like we're getting Suburbans. Is that what we're getting? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, we would entertain a motion to approve bids, purchases, agreements, contracts, and leases as listed and discussed about.
I'll make a motion to approve bids, purchases, agreements, contracts, and leases as listed.
Seconded.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Churchman, second by Mr. Parker to approve these bids and purchases. Any further discussion? Ms. Carpenter?
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm,
Yes.
Miss Ashley,
Yes.
Mr. Churchman,
Yes.
Dr. Drummond,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Moving to the Elementary International Language Pilot Program. Dr. All, you want to make a couple introductory comments? And I think that Dr. Manikowski, or you are addressing this as well. So,
I think what we've done is, last month, we did have a report on this proposal. We have reconvened a meeting with the Professional Council Subcommittee, the teachers, the staff members who worked on this proposal, and are proposing tonight that we implement a limited pilot program to study both the outcomes of the student learning as it relates to an international language, to study the qualitative parts of parent satisfaction, student satisfaction, staff satisfaction, to look at any maybe unintended or intended consequences here in a limited number of schools in terms of going forward. Dr. Bev Graham is on staff here. We added her this year. Her specialty is program analyst and evaluation. This gives us an opportunity to design an evaluation system for this, both on the quantitative and qualitative side. To do that, the staff is recommending a minimum of 6 pilot schools. There's some discussion whether we could do fewer, but we wanted to make sure if we were going to look at the implementation that we looked at whether we had representation in schools that are currently using the program after school and those not, those that represent both Title I and non-Title I schools, to have enough in the study, both large and small, and you had a chart of criteria there that would allow us to get a good sense for the board on whether action to expand or to discontinue that would occur next year. So I think that in moving forward, this is much more limited. It's a pilot. It would give us an opportunity to study it. It would follow our approach of being data-driven before we go any further in that area, and give us an opportunity to get feedback from a wider group of parents, students, and staff members. And so Dr. Banikowski's here. Mr. Earl Martin is here, Director of Elementary Education, and I think there are other members of the committee that are here as well. So I think we could address any questions that you might have.
okay, questions or comments? Further clarification, anybody? Read it.
Oh, I tell you, this is a really difficult situation I find myself in personally. I am not satisfied that we're teaching foreign language without a certified language instructor in the classroom, to put it bluntly. We wouldn't teach math, science, history, chemistry, you name it. We wouldn't teach any of those subjects without a certified teacher in the classroom. On the other hand, I understand our budgetary limitations, and I'm trying to take that into consideration in this situation. So that being said, I would like to hear from my fellow board members.
Anybody? Mr. Parker?
All right, I'll lead off. I have, personally, I wish I personally could speak a foreign language. Personally, I would like that, but I have to look at this from the standpoint of our students and our teachers, our administrators, and our taxpayers. So I have to put all my personal feelings aside and to look at that way. And I have some concerns about the elementary language, foreign language program. We have 3 goals. No child left behind. Every student becomes 100% proficient. Closing the achievement gap. And schools meeting the state standard of excellence. And we've enumerated numbers of others of those this evening. And I'm concerned that by introducing this program into every elementary school, we will lose our focus on these 3 important goals. In the book, Good to Great, Jim Collins and his researchers indicate that organizations that want to move from good to great must practice the hedgehog concept, which he learned from Admiral Jim Stockdale, the longest POW held captive during the Vietnam War. Admiral Stockdale credited his ability to survive those long years of captivity to having piercing insight in surviving each and every day. Jim Collins called this the hedgehog concept. We call it focus. I have a saying, another one. If you chase 2 rabbits, both will escape. I've stated many times that our plate is full to overcrowding. We have a bond task force. We just introduced and just approved our policy on health and nutrition, which is going to require a lot of willpower, a lot of execution, and a lot of organizational initiative in order for us to implement that. So I'm deeply concerned that we would lose our focus on our core curriculum, and an unintended consequence years from now would be that our children would not be meeting the requirements of No Child Left Behind. In regards to closing the achievement gap, I am deeply concerned that this program will inhibit our progress in closing the achievement gap. How will this program help a child that is struggling with math, science, or reading? I know that this is a voluntary program. I think we're very clear about that. It is not mandatory. But I'm concerned about a child who opts out. What are they going to be doing during that period of time? And I understand that the belief is that by implementing this, there's other benefits for our children. All that being said, I'm also an innovator, a risk taker. I'm also for looking on the cutting edge and being on the edge. I have another saying, used to have this saying, if you're living on the edge, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Kind of moved back from the edge over the years. But I would be in favor of a very limited pilot in order for us to at least evaluate this, at least to look at it, at least to say to the community and to ourselves, we looked at it, we analyzed it, and it's either going to be yay or nay a year from now. Do we continue, or do we expand, or do we take another year and look at it? So by turning around and I have grave concerns, but by turning around and walking away from it, I think that I don't think we should turn around and walk away from it. By the same token, I'm not in favor of introducing it in all schools, and I would be in favor of 6. Is that the low number? I talked about 3, but I don't think we'd get enough data on that. So I could be interested in looking at a limited pilot with 6 students. That being said, what would we do about the schedule? We know that we're expanding the schedule, and a concern that I would have on a limited pilot with the 6 schools would be, would those 6 schools be on the proposed schedule? And how does staff feel about that? And how does professional counsel feel about that? And how does all the other schools who would not be necessarily on that schedule, how do they feel about that? So I need to hear something about that as to how we would. I wouldn't want to be in October and some staff would be concerned that they were being treated unfairly because their school day was 10 minutes longer. Is it 10 minutes?
It's 10 minutes longer for the student day. It is the same contractual day for teachers in all buildings,
all right.
whether in the pilot
But
or
school
not
still
the pilot.
starts, yeah, I understand, I got you. So from that standpoint, and how do parents feel about it? So,
Well, one thing I would do, and I'm going to maybe give this to Dr. Banikowski on some of the specific parts, but it's my understanding, so I want to make sure that we say this, that the schools, there are 11 schools listed in your board report, 100% of the site council, 100% of the school principals there, and the staff have said that they would like to apply to be in the pilot program for this year. So there's I think we gave some options of 6, 8, or 11, and I think from my perspective, the smaller number is a number that gives us enough for a pilot, but does not take this so far that it would be hard to go back if in fact you weren't satisfied with the results. What I have heard myself and professional counsel is that the staff, the Teachers Association and others are supportive enough of the project that they would like to see at least this limited pilot go forward to see if we can address the questions, and would be open to the board suggesting questions to be part of the evaluation, because you've been hearing from community members, and we would incorporate that. And so I think the sense that I have from the feedback that I've received from staff and from the committee that's worked on this is that these schools very much want to be part of that, and that is strongly supported across the school community. Now, with that said, I can't say that there's not a parent or someone who might not agree, but again, that is also the voluntary part of this, that would be worked out with on an individual basis. So, Dr. Banikowski, or you want to add anything to what I've said?
No, but specifically, we do plan an evaluation program meeting with Dr. Graham. We already know, of course, that the Clark County School District, which implements this, studies 30 schools randomly per year since the inception of the program, so they have data available, and it's just reading a book here that I borrowed from Mr. Martin over there. So they have already an evaluation program in place. The program itself has some evaluation components for assessing skills. We're certainly also, in addition, looking at parent and teacher. But Dr. All is correct. These schools that applied, all 11 of them had overwhelming support to do this pilot program. It wasn't just, well, we think we'd like to be in the pilot. They had to document that they had 100% staff involvement in the discussion, and there was 100% staff consensus as well as site council consensus to move forward, to be even considered at this point. We had other schools that, 85% of the staff wanted to be in a pilot, and we eliminated all those schools and only stuck with the schools that had that type of consensus, because we want to go into this as the strong avenue of some success, but we also want to look at, and the reason we selected the subcommittee, which is a professional council subcommittee, so there gives the answer to the teachers, administrators, and support for it, is that we wanted to make sure we could look at a variety of variables, not unlike what Mr. Round had talked about earlier today, and Dr. Ellis talked about, both Title I and non-Title I schools. We wanted to make sure we looked at those schools that had previous experience doing an after-school club, those who hadn't. If we don't have those variables that make it more difficult to make an analysis at the end of that evaluation study, as well as schools that also had a very school sizes. We're a little stretched with this because we'll only have one school that's a medium school size, 2 large schools with the 6 that are selected, and then several small schools. But it gives us a picture, is it look different in different schools.
Dr. Banikowski, what is the cost for the schools that are being proposed for pilot?
Yes, if we did.
For the what number, Mr. Churchman? For the
Yes, 6 or 8.
6 or 8? Or
6.
Okay.
For the 6, it'd be about $50,000 for the materials and about $62,000 for staff.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last number.
$50,000 for materials and $62,000 for staff. As you remember, this program is operated with classified staff individuals.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that another aspect that we may be looking at, if it works out this way, we want to look for classified staff that would be in these positions that would have some experience with the Spanish language. Not knowing if we can find that. That's another variable, if you will, in the pilot study. Though Clark County also did an analysis of those kids who had a program with a non-Spanish speaking teacher, if you will, and those that did. So it'll give us another piece of variable there as we look at a multivariate kind of analysis on a study.
Thank you for that. I first want to talk as a parent, and I have a son who's going to be in first grade, and I absolutely am in support of foreign language in elementary schools. I think that's the right thing to do. I think as we look at the United States as an area that's lagging the rest of the globe, it's an area where we're behind. This is probably one of the most divided issues I've ever encountered on my short term on the board, and there is no middle ground. As we all have received a considerable amount of feedback, it is split 50-50. There are people that are passionately against this. There are people that are passionately for it. So it's been difficult to try and represent the community on this in my eyes and draw the middle line. And I always enjoy Mr. Parker's quotes. You know, and it reminds me of a movie that I saw this past summer that if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's great for all age groups, and that's Glory Road. And it's the story about Coach Haskins, who takes his team to the national championship. And I won't spoil the ending for you if you haven't seen it. But what really strikes me, and my son, the kindergartner, enjoyed it, because in the movie he emphasizes focusing on the fundamentals, getting back to the basics. And that if you're going to succeed in life, it's that fundamental foundation that will cause you to succeed or not. And so I weigh that against the fact that it was not too many months ago we talked about unfunded mandates in this room and the fact that we didn't have enough money in our education system. So that's a concerning point to me. I also look at our balanced scorecard and I see areas that we're falling behind, or let me rephrase that we're not as far ahead as we want to, and that's not a criticism, it's just a fact. We look at reading proficiency for every student and how important that is. So I struggle with, is this the right time? I don't believe that we should walk away from this either. But on the other hand, I personally feel rushed in this decision. And I guess what I would like to see as we go through in the next month or so budget evaluations, that we weigh this against our available funding, even though in a big scheme of things, the amount of money that we're looking at for the pilot, I would consider to be a small amount. And I guess I also would like to see a smaller pilot than 6 schools, and I understand the data behind as to why we're doing it. So I want to once again preface all that by saying, as a parent and as a board member, I'm absolutely supportive of this initiative. I just struggle with, is now the right time, and have we fully vetted out what it is we need to do?
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just want to echo my support for a pilot program. I think limiting it to 6 is the right thing to do to start with. I'm not, Mr. Churchman, I'm not so much concerned about the budgetary part of it, because I think, you know, it is a lot of money, but in the big picture, I keep coming back to our desire to be innovative, and I think this is innovative. It's a pilot program, which means it's going to be a test. We're going to evaluate it, we're going to check it, we're going to see if it does any good. I want to stress that we need to pay particular attention to our progress in the schools in the other academic areas, and I know we're doing that regardless of whether this pilot program is in place. I know some concern has been expressed that this is going to take away from other important things, and I know that's not the desire of the subcommittee that's recommended this. But I would like to see us move forward with a pilot program to be evaluated, and then we'll look at it again and move on from there, whether we continue it or disband it. I know the plan time that's talked about in here, that's not a reason to do it, but I think that's one of the things that intrigues me about it, is I'd like to see what that means to the learning community at that school in that school building, because I think there's other implications that we can take from that, what we can learn from that in other ways that might help each of those elementary school buildings. And I'm very interested in that part of this after we get through an evaluation time, that we might adopt even more broadly and put other things that enhance the elementary education experience. So I would speak in favor of a limited pilot program and moving forward tonight on that.
Dr. Bankowski, just a couple of questions. I know that emails that I've received and information, 2 of the major concerns were certainly loss of computer time and library time, which is considered reading. I know there are many other opportunities for students to have technology exposure and experience. Can you reflect that, and also the ability for that continued reading and exposure to literature?
Well, certainly part of the way we designed the computer and the library time for those limited grade levels was also to get the appropriate plan time that we had worked on. So there was part of that as a rationale for that. We use technology much more than a 30-minute lesson twice a week. It would be foolish for us to think that's the only time we expect children to be using technology. We need to infuse that constantly in the classroom, and that's the eventual goal of that. And certainly with reading, that's infused in every moment of the day, probably more moments we like always, standing in line, reading, but we know how important that is. So we'll be monitoring that very importantly and taking a look at that. What does that do for computer time? What does that use for technology implication? I think one of the things we'll look at, you know, learning a foreign language in the literature would say that it also has a positive impact on other academic subjects and learning of English. And certainly, we'll be looking to see what impact it has on learning other subjects. I don't think you can tell that in a one-year pilot, because mostly you're making decisions by January, February, so it'll take a longer period of time than that. But we'll certainly be monitoring that. We would be, as you said, monitoring that regardless, because that is a part of our program that we're looking at. So it's looking at both those things of innovation, how does it impact other academic subjects? Many people consider international language one of the cores. And so, you know, you have different people and different perspectives in that. But certainly the literature speaks clearly that younger the children are exposed to a language, the more comfortable they are. And I think Mr. Martin has some.
Yes, I wonder if I might say, Mrs. Wilhelm, even though some comments have been made about that loss of time in computer and in library, it does return time back to what it was a couple of years ago as we made a change to try to increase a little bit of plan time for the elementary teachers. And one of the issues, I mean, just logistically, and I think as an administrator you would be aware of this, those are the only 2 times that are in 40-minute time blocks. And everything else is in 30-minute or 60-minute time blocks, which creates a little bit of a challenge for our administrators or those who work on the scheduling. And so that was one of kind of the other motives for looking at trying to get everything to a 30 or 60-minute time block, so that would make scheduling a little bit easier.
The reflection also from Mr. Gilmore, if this is approved for a pilot program, would be that plan time. Again, when we look at meeting the standard of excellence in AYP, we know that it's crucial for teachers to have the opportunity to look at data, which drives decisions. And that data also says, let's take a look at the needs of those students in flexible grouping and differentiation of teaching. So, in fact, it could truly enhance some of what is happening in the classroom when you talk about integration of subjects, when you talk about meeting the needs of kids in those different areas. So I think it would be important to be able to segregate that information too.
And we've certainly seen that even at our high school levels where we've implemented professional learning teams and professional learning communities, how important that is for teams of educators to be able to look at data and drive their instruction with that. Our Teachers Association certainly has been strong with that.
And I'm wondering if I might just mention, we could pull quite a bit of research together about the other benefits, the cognitive benefits of those who study another language at the elementary level. I just happened to pull one document from the IES Language Foundation that talks about what the research says in terms of those who are exposed to second languages in the elementary school have higher scores on standardized tests in reading and language arts, that children who study a second language show greater cognitive development in several different areas: mental flexibility, creativity, divergent thinking, higher order thinking skills. So I think sometimes, you know, when we talk about narrowing things down, we're thinking of that as a negative thing, and sometimes when we provide an opportunity for children to have a broader exposure to some of the experiences that they might have, instead of actually being a negative, it ends up being a positive. And I think there's some quite a bit of research that could be shown in that area. Can you both speak, or either one of you speak to one more question? And Mr. Round brought it up in his comments about, and we've heard this in some of the email that we've seen, these aren't certified instructors, you know, and obviously we don't have the budget for certified instructors to do this. Can you talk about how that program is done in that very program is done in other districts, whether or not it's certified instructors or not, and what your kind of respond to that concern that they're not certified instructors? What are we trying to accomplish if we're not using certified instructors? Dr. Banikowski referred to a study. It is rather interesting that a study has come out in 2004 about just studying actually the effectiveness of video-based programs. And I thought it was very interesting. They compared a number of programs, including the one that we're looking at, in terms of their effectiveness. So we have a little bit of research to draw on in terms of what they've done. And they have done some research in that area. And typically, they make the statement pretty clearly, as we've talked about several times, obviously the preferred and most effective way to teach elementary language, or any, whether elementary or secondary, is with a certified language instructor. But in my conversation with Ms. Ashley, I said, if we really ask that question, will we do that in terms of hiring certified language teachers for 31 elementary schools, I'm thinking probably not, at least because we've been talking about this for a number of years to begin with. So this study says, is this a reasonable alternative? And the study indicates that it is. But their recommendation is that it be facilitated by someone who does speak the language. And that's what we would prefer to do. And as a matter of fact, if we are approved for a limited pilot, we would prefer to post it as someone who maybe not certified in the area, but who does know the language, who does speak the language, so that that would help the program be more effective. And that's one of the results that this study has indicated.
Mr. Martin, to build on what Mr. Gilmore said, how exactly will we measure the success of this? What's the plan for that? So we know the baseline before and what the results would be afterwards.
Well, I think, as Dr. Banikowski mentioned, this program in itself has some assessment measures. So I think that's one of the things that we would like to build into it, is just to determine the effectiveness in terms of students learning aspects of the language. But secondly, I don't want to second guess some of the things that Dr. Bev Graham might advise us in terms of designing an effective evaluation program. And I think that's what we would want to do if approved, is sit down and look at the components of what that evaluation might look like.
One thing I might add, it just struck me, we have some history here in this district with using classified staff to deliver instruction at the elementary, and that is our computer studies program. And that's our program that's K-6. We implemented it 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's not certified staff. They teach the technology. It's been very successful for us. It's been very cost-effective and successful for us. And so that is a model we've already had at the elementary level to deliver a specialized curriculum. One of the things that we have a lot of success with, whether it's our paraeducators or others that assist teachers in the classroom, that we either have a program that is designed by somebody else that we teach somebody to deliver. So paraeducators are oftentimes delivering curriculum and direct instruction. They may not be responsible for designing that to meet the IEP or what might be best practices, but they are the deliverer of it. And so another component of that computer lab assistant program has been ongoing training. And so there is curriculum developed by the direct district and also the ongoing training that goes forward. So it's not just putting someone in the classroom. We're developing skills over time. And if the program stays and the person develops, there is that professional development that comes along with the individuals there that very much aligns. So that's another piece we happen to have uniquely in Olathe that you wouldn't necessarily find in some of the other districts, and so have some experience in working with non-certified staff members to deliver a prescribed curriculum. So I had that observation.
I would like to refer to myself as an expert, but I am a 29-year veteran language teacher. And just to kind of retool our thinking a bit, there is no other curricular area that is like language, because every person in this room speaks a language. They spoke a language before they went to school, before they had any formal training. Language is the result of input, not the result of output. You become proficient in language because of what you hear or read. You do not become proficient in language on what you say, because of what you say. You further refine it. That is why I support it is just a given having a certified teacher is the gold standard for any curriculum. But that's the reason I, as a 29-year veteran of language instruction and was facilitator for the entire International Language Department in this district, supports a DVD-based program. It's on the issue of, I know that students acquire a language based on input. DVD that is of high interest will provide rich input to these students. Mr. Martin and I met with Mr. Round that spoke earlier, and I explained the concept of language acquisition versus language learning. This is really not a heavy language learning program. It's a language acquisition program which relies a lot on input of the language. Students sitting, hearing the language and understanding it because of the nonverbal clues that are included in the DVD program. That may be more technical than you wanted me to get into, but that's why I support this program, is it does address the acquisition needs of language learners.
One of the comments made here tonight is that the additional planning time is a side benefit, and I completely agree with that. It's important, I think, whenever you're innovative, it brings with it risk, and this has risk. What's our exit plan? Have we given thought to that? And my concern being that if for some reason we were to move forward with a pilot and they weren't successful, and then that planning time that's been added now has to come back.
Well, it would come back to the same standard that the other 25 schools would be staying at. So in other words, the vast majority of the elementary schools are staying in the same mode that we are right now. With those 6, they would know there would be a pilot. If the pilot were not to go forward, then the day would go back to the standard day, and it would be like the other 25 schools. Secondly, I was thinking about the investment in the additional resources, okay? That would be there because those are purchased. The staff time can stop, but those are purchased. But we've had some high interest in after-school programming. We're continuing to grow. And so on a voluntary basis, I think we could make use of those resources for extended learning opportunities if we needed to do that. So that would be the exit strategy that I'd see.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Poland.
The 19 schools that currently do it voluntarily, the ones that aren't selected, are they intending to continue the voluntary program?
And actually, I think a number of them are here tonight, or representatives from those schools. But yes, that would be our hope and desire, is that even if they were not in the pilot, that we would continue to do the before or after school program as is, because it is a great opportunity for kids. One of the reasons we've proposed this, though, obviously, is that before or after school program isn't very equitable. If a kid has to go home or go to another activity after school or can't get there before school, then it really doesn't provide an equitable opportunity for everyone.
And I understand that, and I appreciate that. What I guess what I was leading up to is I think we've got a tremendous opportunity to study a vast array of data here, because we got schools that are going to be doing it during the school period. We got kids that are going to be doing it after the, on a voluntary basis, and we've got kids that are not going to be doing it. So we got a vast opportunity to look at data from, to see what the long-term benefits is. I'll have a problem with making a decision to go to all 31 schools, or 32 now, I guess, by that time, all 32 schools based on a one-year pilot program. I would like to see, I guess we've been talking about for a long time, so a couple more years isn't going to kill anybody. But, the long-term effects, one of the things that the people brought up was you use it or you lose it. Okay, what happens to the kids down the road after they've left this program? How many of them actually go into a language program? What's the continuation process? So I guess I would have a difficult time myself this time next year saying, okay, yeah, we've got 1 year under our belt. The 6 schools, it was a great success. To me, that's not that would be a difficult set of data for me to make a decision on. I need to know what happens to those kids once they get out of 6th grade, what happens to them in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Do they continue on versus the number of kids that weren't even in the program, the schools that don't have it at all. How many of them go into a program? I know it's difficult to accumulate all that data, but a 1-year program like this, to me, would be very difficult to make a decision on.
And I think it's just like with all decisions, we have to have our criteria and what our top criteria is. If our criteria for a band and orchestra program that starts in elementary is, 100% of the students stay with that, then that would be our highest criteria, and that would help us make a decision on whether or not to have it at another grade level. So I think we can come up with our criteria, and everyone can have input into what is the most important part of that criteria, because just like with most decisions in education, we won't 100% meet every piece of that criteria, but maybe the most important criteria is that our AYP, adequate yearly progress, is maintained. We don't reduce the number of students who are proficient or below in reading. Maybe another important variable will be that we have parent-student satisfaction, that the kids actually learn something. So I think we'll come up with our criteria. That's part of an evaluation program to help determine what it is, the multitude of variables you look at, and to determine where we're going on that next step. So I think we're proficient at doing that. We never have the longest years of data because sometimes we feel we need to move quicker than we have 3 or 4 years of data, but we'll bring all that to the board and let you take a look at that, as well as our professional counsel, which has been an integral part of this whole decision-making process to this point.
I guess in summarizing my statements, you guys have put a lot of work into it, and I commend you for that. This isn't just something you just picked out of the air and brought to us. And I'm in favor of a pilot program, but to me, I would be in favor of a longer pilot program in order to make a decision to go to the whole school district.
I don't think that's unreasonable, Mr. Pullen. I think that's a good point.
Okay, other discussions, comments? Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I was to point out, we do have individuals representing both schools who were considered in the 6th, the 8th, the 11th represented here this evening. If you wish to speak with them.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. We have a recommendation before us. Do we have a motion about this recommendation?
Before we do that, Dr. Drummond, I just want to discuss this a little bit with the board. Earlier, I had indicated that I would be supportive of 6 schools for a pilot, and I see by the staff's has given us an option of 8 schools, and if we went with 8 schools, then each high school would have 2 elementary schools represented, and that would seem to be a fair way of doing that, and that every high school attendance area had 2 elementary schools represented in a pilot. So I'm just putting that out there for us to think about.
It would be my preference that we would consider the 6 schools and not increase the size of it based on the pros and cons that we've discussed here this evening.
All right. Okay, and I appreciate that perspective, Mr. Churchman. I just wanted to put that out there for us to be able to say we thought about it.
The question would be, will those 6 schools give us enough information about the diversity of the schools? In the selection of those, diversity of schools, size of school, history of student learning?
Do you want to go first?
I did want to add one thing because it wasn't in the report and we failed to say this. Of those 6 schools that we put on the recommendation, and you can see how we came up with them. We tried to look at our criteria here and select those schools. That does give us only one ELL site, English Language Learner site, and that would be Central. There might be an advantage with one of those schools that's in the 8 category is also an ELL site, and that's Pleasant Ridge. And I just throw that out because that is an area that people have asked about. What are you going to do with a student who already speaks Spanish? What are you going to do with them for this period of this program? And that's a variable that we're going to have to study and to look at. Of course, our number one priority with our English language learners is just that, English language learners. They are here to learn English. And so that's very important. But what do we do with students that need some exposure? Those that are both Hispanic and bring Spanish to the table and those that don't. So that would be the only criteria. We didn't list that in here, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of that as well.
Dr. Banikowski, on that same topic, what do you do with students who are fluent in a language other than English and other than Spanish? Will they be participating in this program?
And that's the benefit of a pilot. Gives an opportunity to study that and how we're going to handle that. Of course, our next step in the process, should you approve this pilot, we have to get together and talk about what we're doing next year. To step into this project is going to take some planning and summer work, and we have that already on the table, and we're just have people waiting to study this, put together the final details, the schools that are going to participate, and really talk about some consistency and what does it mean that this is voluntary. What are you going to do? As one of the, I can't remember which indicated, what do the students do who have chosen not to participate? We have to put some final details to a lot of that, and we're ready for that work. So a slight answer, but not quite the thorough yet.
I understand that that's a variable, and I wanted to make sure, though, that it was on the radar screen and that it was being considered as to how those situations would be handled.
one of the things I think that we're seeing more of is we're seeing students that are trilingual in high school. And so they may have, it's not uncommon for some of our students to take a Chinese advanced placement test because that's their native language, be highly proficient in advanced placement English, and be studying French or Spanish. And they're doing, I mean, there's a growing trend to be multilingual, not just bilingual. And so I think that would be an opportunity. I'm like Mr. Parker. I feel like I will not be educated fully until I can speak another language, and it's something that I'm embarrassed to say that I don't. And I'm very interested to see our young people who are really trilingual, multilingual, and that the brain can handle all of that. And the research says it. I have not personally experienced it, but the research says that. So I think it's something we need to pay attention to. The bottom line here is that the number one focus is that our kids have to do what we talked about before. They have to meet the fundamentals, the core requirements. And so when I'm sitting here listening to the design and the evaluation, one of the things we should be able to compare is there any change in the academics of the core areas in the pilot schools? I mean, that's independent of learning the language. And then the second part of the evaluation component is, are the students learning to standards or benchmark standards that we might be able to identify? Third, I think there has to be a staff survey of is this performing in all those other angles and approaches that we think are going to happen. Are the parents whose students participate in this program satisfied? Parents can tell a lot when kids come home at night, and whether they feel like they're interested, excited, energized, motivated by an experience. And what do the students say about it? I mean, those are some of the key stakeholders. So we've got to look at the quantitative data, and then we need to look at the qualitative as well. And then maybe to get at what Mr. Poland was suggesting is that we could do some digging and probing in the research on to see what's out there in terms of long-term benefits and comparisons. And so we might be able to pull some of that back in to our study here. I'd also want to point out is that, a pilot is something that we've done some research on. We would not go out and just throw something at kids. And so I want to make that clear, that we have enough indicators here to believe that this would be a successful experience, because I wouldn't want to put children in a situation that we didn't have some expectation that we could handle that successfully, because that's not how we operate as a school district in terms of the work of the staff. And yet at the same time, when you bring something to scale across an entire school, which this would be another way to take a look at this, the multiple grade levels, those are the things you can't figure out until you've done it. And so I think that the approach that we've proposed, it will address a lot of those questions. Maybe not all of them, but I think a lot of them.
Okay, I will put aside my purist attitudes. You all have brought up some excellent points tonight, and I appreciate your comments, and I'm going to hold out hope that besides the language learning, that there's going to be increased cultural awareness that goes along with this, because bottom line, and I think Larry would agree, I don't know if he's still here, that, there you are, that part of learning a language is becoming more aware of the culture and the background of the people, and I think at whatever level we do that, that is a good thing as far as our international global economy is concerned. And so I sense that there's great support from my fellow board members for this program, and I would be willing to support a pilot program based on the comments that we've made this evening.
Is that a motion?
I move.
Can I say one more thing before you
Sure.
move, Ms. Ashley? Not to muddy the waters anymore, but Mr. Parker's comment about what going to 8 instead of 6 does, it also provides another medium-sized school that we don't have in that 6 mix. There's only one medium-sized school in the mix of 6, that if we went to 8 would add another medium-sized school and a small school, but would give us 2 medium-sized then populations. And I hadn't thought about that till you made your comment.
That goes to the equity issue of having 2 elementaries to each high
being
school.
fair across all the neighborhoods
Yeah.
that we serve. That there wouldn't be an area in our district that doesn't have this opportunity. Sorry, Ms. Ashley, unless there's other comments.
I would just like to say, you know, we're still talking about a one-year pilot program. When the data is, when Dr. Graham starts putting the data acquisition together, I would like it to be slanted toward a long-term acquisition of data. So, because I, once again, I feel very difficult, it would be very difficult for me to make a decision next year based on one-year data.
One thing that may give you some options in the year is that, you know, obviously if some of the preliminary data, the priority criteria is coming in and it's not satisfactory, then, you know, we need to do, as Mr. Churchman said, an exit strategy. However, one thing that I think we can be more cautious about is, let's say that the data is very positive or looks good. The board has an option to say we want to continue that for a second year without expansion. The board has the option to say, let's continue it and try a few more of the schools that have high interest. I don't see us rolling out after, I mean, I may have not looking that way. I don't see us rolling out the remainder of the schools the second year. Because I would agree then we've gone from a small limited pilot to just doing the rest. I would agree with that. I think this is one of those things we've worked very hard, this group's worked very hard to get buy-in from the site councils and school community. And if we can make the adjustment of time and transportation and everything work smoothly here, and we have staff satisfaction, and if your data continues to be positive, then we can have schools apply to come on, and it may be over a period of time. We can take a look at that. So those are all what I would say board options that are still within your control in the spring, as opposed to saying we have a one-year pilot, and then if it looks good, we have 26 that are going right after it, and I would sense that that's probably not the best way to roll something out.
That's where we started this discussion.
Yeah.
Was all of them, and now we're back down here.
Well, it was a sort of a phase 1 and a phase 2, and so I think we're not talking about a phase 1 and phase 2. We're talking about a limited pilot, much smaller, and then depending on what data you receive and your comfort level with it, and that's still within your authority.
Go ahead.
We ready for a motion?
It's to be cruel to me, huh?
And I think we probably need to include in this motion the number of schools.
Yes.
Because we've kind of gone back and forth here, so we can either vote it up or down, but let's start with the number.
I'd also like to include that we develop a defined exit strategy in the event that becomes required.
I think that can be understood.
I move that we implement a limited elementary foreign language pilot program at 8 selected elementary schools, 2 each in the 4 high school attendance areas.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Mr. Parker?
Ms. Ashley, could we make sure that our motion said that it was a voluntary and limited pilot?
Sure, we could insert the word voluntary.
Thank you.
A voluntary limited pilot program.
Pilot program with voluntary participation, the opportunity for
Okay.
an opt-out. I don't know how you make the motion, but
Do I need to redo it, Betty, or do you have it?
Ms. Ashley, can we also clarify that it's the 8 recommended elementary schools in the staff report? If that's so, I'll second your motion.
I'm not going to go that far because I'd like them to reconsider the schools.
Okay.
I'd just like to say 8 selected elementary schools, 2 each in the 4 high school attendance areas. That's just a request on my part.
Ms. Carpenter, do you have a motion?
I think I do. I can.
you want to,
Could you kind of read that back for us?
Good luck.
I don't have it. I kind of got it mixed up here, though.
Sure.
Motion to implement limited pilot program for 8 schools with voluntary participation, with 2 each in the 4 high schools.
Attendance areas.
High school attendance areas.
Okay, we have a motion before us. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Poland. Any further discussion? Ms. Carpenter?
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Miss Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes, with guarded optimism and high expectations.
Dr. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes, and one last comment.
One last word. Yeah.
Thank you. You know, this is about execution, and to the parents and to the staff of the schools that are not going to be a part of the pilot, please understand that we as a board have to make sure that we can execute, that we can make it happen in the classroom. I have another saying. Somebody at the corporate headquarters sneezes, I get pneumonia. We want to make sure that parents, students, and teachers and principals don't get pneumonia on this. So let us look at it and evaluate it for a year, a couple years, and then we can talk about it again. But you can see how we struggled with this, but I think this is the right decision for us.
Okay, Ms. Carpenter, I think we had others who haven't voted yet.
Yeah. 7
That was the last
passed.
one.
Motion.
I haven't voted. Did I vote?
You voted.
Yes. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Good discussion. We'll move forward. We're having so much fun. We have before us the opportunity to schedule 2 more meetings this month and 1 more meeting in July, which probably will be extended to 2 meetings. So you have before you the first one, a special meeting for a budget republication hearing. Dr. All and Mr. Diener have some comments they want to make about this before we go forward.
Yeah, I'd like Mr. Diener to make some comments.
It's in many ways a very simple situation. The state has more funding for special education than they anticipated when they established the reimbursement level a year ago. And because of that, there's an additional $1,100 that's being reimbursed back to the districts across the state of Kansas per instructional teacher in special education. That additional amount, which is coming to the Olathe district schools, creates a situation where our legal maximum authority actually exceeds what the board approved last August 18th for the budget. If you'll remember, there was discussion about, remember we always have that 450 contingency, and there's always a question of why in the world do we have that large of a contingency to what appears to increase the budget authority unnecessarily. Well, it's for these kinds of things, and in this particular year, 450 wasn't enough. Not that going back and doing what we're doing right now is a problem, other than the fact that you are going to have to come to another meeting. We found this information out at 4 o'clock last Friday. So it's as soon as we could get it to you. But it's worth $20,000 additional dollars if we go through the process.
And a total amount, Gary? It's $20,000 if we increase our authority, but what's the total amount? Am I missing something here? It's like $700 and some thousand.
I'm sorry, yes. The additional dollars to the district is about $700,000, which, now it's going to get complicated. Should I say all the numbers?
Well, we only have authority for how much?
For $20,000 less than the $700,000.
Right, so we have to increase our authority to capture the whole amount that should be coming to us. Is that
Very
correct?
good. I wish I would have just said you say it. Yes, thank you. That's correct. Mr.
And this has no impact on mill levy.
No impact on the mill levy whatsoever.
So I want to make that clear.
It's just authority.
It's just authority.
Any clarification questions from board members?
Well, I think it's something we need to do. And that June the 14th date works best for me. I don't know where everybody else is.
Works best for me as
too.
well.
Wednesday, and that should be a very short meeting.
One thing, I'll certainly defer to what the board wants to do, but I would ask for consideration that we start that meeting at 6.
That works
Would
for me.
welcome any feedback on that, if that's a problem.
Works for me, Mr. Churchman.
I make a motion that we would approve notice of hearing for publication and to set.
Excuse me, Harlan, just a second.
Oh.
We're talking about date, June
Yeah.
14th.
She already gave me authority to vote for her.
Okay.
June 14th. June 14th. Okay.
I can't be there, but Kevin can be there, so that's important.
Okay.
It's not a
We have
problem.
a quorum.
Yep.
Just to make sure there's no misunderstanding, that's not just a meeting, that's a public hearing.
Public hearing.
Public hearing.
For the public to be able to
I see.
come and
Okay, all
make
right.
comments.
A motion to approve notice of hearing for publication and to set a special meeting date and time for budget republication hearing on Wednesday, June 14th at 6 PM.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gilmore, motion by Mr. Parker to set a special date on Wednesday, the 14th at 6 o'clock for republication and public hearing. Any further discussion? Ms. Carpenter?
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes?
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. The motion passes. We'll have this special meeting. Opportunity for another special meeting, end-of-the-year meeting. This is a time in which we do end-of-the-year transactions. We try to do it at the very end of the year to give staff time to do all the bookkeeping that goes along with that, and then we make these transfers before the end of the year so we can not have to send this money back. So it's suggested that we have a brief meeting on June 29th at 5:30. Any discussions or calendar issues?
That's end-of-year transfers. That's not budget, is it?
Correct. Just end-of-year transfer, short meeting. Emphasis on short, Dr. All. Right, Mr. Diener, short meeting. On the 29th?
That's up to the board.
Gary, I want to make clear, on the 29th, that's end-of-year transactions only. Is there any other preliminary budget work?
We will be providing the board with additional budget information. At that time, hopefully, Dr. George will have some information from the courts and perhaps some responses they've had. Or maybe they won't have anything. I do want to provide additional information to the board because at the July 13th meeting, which is also going to be discussion, and that's suggested, we're going to be needing to move moving along with the budget process, and I'm going to be hopefully laying out some options for the board at the year-end meeting in June. Now, whether or not you want to have a lot of discussion on that is up to you, but the intent is to have additional information that's laid out for the options that are going to be available.
I personally, this is just me, can be there for the end-of-the-year transaction and vote on that, but if the meeting is extended, I have some other commitments I need to move to, so.
Understand.
But I'm sure we'll have a quorum and probably don't need one.
Yeah, and then Mr. Houghton also reminded me that we're going to have, and this is up for discussion pretty soon, but property liability and workers' compensation, that agreement will have the solid numbers at that time, and so that will need to be approved, plus maybe some other bids that we might have.
Yeah, and that's a concern on the length of the meeting that night, because there are several, I think, other obligations. Is there, I'm just asking you, Gary, is there an opportunity to just consider Wednesday, June 28th for end of year? Can your department handle that?
Yes, we could handle the Wednesday.
I would prefer the 28th because no offense, Dr. Drummond, but I think it's, we're going to have we would need to have some discussions because we're going to be talking about our cash reserves at that particular time. Yeah. So, and I'm in the same position on the 29th. I couldn't be able to attend a long meeting.
I cannot attend at all on the 28th, but Kevin can. We're okay. So which date seems to work best?
What about the
for board?
27th?
No.
Did I hear no?
Not sure they can do all the
That
necessary work.
starts putting pressure on our ability to be able to have the information
year-end.
available.
If we went to the 27th?
Yes.
28th is fine. If that's best for the board.
Is the 30th too late, being the last day, Friday, or is that
If that's the preference of the board, we will do the 30th.
I say no to
about
that.
that today, but that's another option.
30th would work for me. All 3 dates would be fine.
In the evening on the 30th?
Right?
No.
But is.
I will be
is
out of
there-
town.
Is,
so
oh, you're going to be out of town?
I'll be out of town.
Is there, and I
Experienced
know,
board member planned this well.
and I know this might be a problem for Mr. Churchman, is there any opportunity on the 29th, on the Thursday, to start a little earlier than 5:30 to get the transactions done? Could we start at 5? I mean, it's more of an end-of-year kind of thing. Would that, if we did 5 to 6 or 5 to 6:15 or 5 to 6:30 for this discussion? Because you're not, other than the end-of-year transactions, the budget discussion does not require any action that night. It's just, an understanding. So I'm
Presentation.
just throwing out another option for you.
Is that going to help Mr. Drummond to start earlier?
But
It could, I
Jim,
mean,
you
I
had-
have to probably leave by 6, but that gives it hour instead of half hour, but I don't want to handcuff Mr. Churchman here, so.
Yeah, I mean, once again, that wouldn't be my desire, but if it works best for the board, we'll make it work.
It seems to me the 28th fits most people. Am I speaking correctly here, that each one of you can do the 28th pretty easily? Seemed to me to be the best route. Certainly this board can go forward with Mr. Gilmore chairing it, so.
I move that we set a special meeting date for end of fiscal year transactions for Wednesday, June 28th at 5:30 PM.
I think it's better for Mr. Churchman at 6. Is that right, Mr. Churchman? Not to speak for you, but
It would be preferred, but I'll defer to the board on that, not knowing what everyone else's schedule is.
6 is fine.
6 is fine. I can do 6. No problem. It doesn't bother me.
so Ashley, would you amend your motion to 6? Would that be okay?
I move we set a special meeting date and time for end of year fiscal transactions for Wednesday, June 28th at 6 PM.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Ashley, a second by Mr. Gilmore to have a special meeting for end-of-year transaction on June 28th at 6 PM. Any further discussion? Ms. Carpenter?
Ms. Ashley?
Yes?
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Dr. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Tolan?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We have end-of-the-year meeting scheduled. Again, we're having so much fun. We want to schedule one more in July here, and it's suggested on July 13th. This would be our first of the year meeting, I believe, and we would do our business for July as well as the traditional beginning of school year business as well. Again, I will be out of town during that period of time, but that is no issue from my perspective, so. How's that fit for everybody else?
I will also be out of town.
5, we have a quorum. Everybody else can be there, if you want to go forward with that.
What, well, you're going to elect officers that night. You're going to do all your beginning of year approvals and appointments. It's probably a meeting where,
Two.
and there's more budget
We would be
discussion.
yeah, that evening, we would be asking for the publication of the budget.
And so I think it would be better if we could try to have more of the board there, but we'll have to work around whatever. I mean, the first Thursday of the month is the 6th of July, and that's, that week in the past has always been a challenge for getting people there. We could, the next week, we've got, the 11th or the 13th, a Tuesday or a Thursday. I don't know if that makes any difference to,
I won't be here the next week.
no,
but-
I'm talking that same week of the 13th.
Oh,
The 11th, I'm going back.
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Are you out that whole week?
I'm out that whole week.
What would the board feel about the first week of July? I know it's close to a holiday. but
I will
still.
be gone then, but
You're talking about the 6th of July?
Yes.
I'm fine with that.
I would be gone.
We will not have the budget ready for publication the first week. There's no way.
That's
The
what-
publication has to have in it the actual expenditures from the year prior.
Yeah.
And that simply would not give us time
Yeah.
to do
The,
that.
the challenge here is that the end of the fiscal year is June 30th. And they have a lot of, and that's been another reason why, I maybe should have clarified that we've used that second week in July to do the organizational meeting. And I heard you say both would be gone on the 13th too. Would two people be gone on the 11th, or was that, or you're gone too?
I would be gone.
I think they both said they're gone all week, didn't they?
They're gone all week?
Correct.
Okay.
Could we go to the next week, the 20th?
Week of the 17th?
Gary's gone, he said.
Yeah,
Well,
he's
I'm
gone.
sure Randy could fill in
Yeah.
for that. At that,
Randy, you want to vote on that?
at that point in time, okay, I mean, I just might remind you that at that point in time, the board still will not be making their final decisions on all the major concerns that you might have about the budget. What you'll be looking at and approving at that meeting is the maximum published budget, sort of the top level that could possibly be approved. At your final meetings in August, you always have the capability of reducing that, still impacting the mill levies, still impacting the total budget, still changing the maximum LOB. All of those decisions can still be made. And what we will be doing, and this will be coming out more clearly at the end of June, but we will be providing you, the board, an opportunity to publish a budget that utilizes every opportunity you have available to you. All dollars that are available according to the new education finance law, any opportunities available at the local level, at the state level, for all the different factors. And I think that basically then just covers us for doing the maximum we possibly can with funding for the children of Olathe. At a later date then, you can always cut back on that.
And how much work is involved in you? I know we've been through this before, but instead of going in with what we as a board approve one time versus doing a maximum, and then if there's alteration to that, doing something different.
That's our job. We will do what the board directs us.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, wouldn't it be better for you to go in one time?
That's always preferred, yes. And that's hopefully what we can get some direction at the end of June. But we're here to meet your needs, though. I understand the complications, and I apologize. I mean, historically, that's just been the 1 week I take my vacation during the summer, because it works well with the reorganization of the board. And when we publish it on Thursday night, but that shouldn't be what guides what you do. So I'm sorry.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I would recommend that we move ahead with the July 13th meeting with the information that you've given, knowing that two of us will not be there, and then we'll rest with the vote of the rest of the board.
You can make that a motion? Ms.
I
Wilhelm?
just would recommend that and move that we do that. Thank you.
The time would be 6 o'clock?
That would be your regular meeting.
The regular meeting at
Be fine with
5:30.
5:30 for the regular meeting. Thanks for the consideration.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms.
Second.
Wilhelm, second by Mr. Gilmore, to set a special meeting on Thursday, the 13th. Any further discussion? Ms. Carpenter?
Mr. Churchman,
Yes.
Dr. Drummond,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Poland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm,
Yes.
Ms. Ashley.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes. Phew, a lot of work. Okay, moving right along here, information items about future actions that we will be considering in the near future, perhaps at the next board meeting or two. I'll just go through the list, and we can come back and you can ask questions about any of these that you wish. Boundary adjustment at Regency Place, naming of elementary school number 32, budget development update, general insurance policy renewal, student trips, curriculum, textbooks, instructional materials. So we can go back to the top. Are there questions any board member has that needs clarification on these items? Again, they're informational, first run through for us, and will come back to us at a later time. But you may need information now, so.
Dr. Drummond,
Yes.
there's one item here. We've got Mr. Charlesworth with us still on the general insurance policy renewal. felt like that's a future action item, and that it's coming up pretty fast. Did he leave? Oh, there he is, okay. And so I just felt like maybe
Sure.
this would be helpful to the board tonight, since he's here, to have him give some comments, if you don't mind. And it can be at any order here, but if that would work as a lead off.
He's there, so let's move forward with it. So thank you.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay.
We turn down a guy with a green tie.
My wife trusts me tonight, okay? Tuesday morning, this coming Tuesday morning, Merle Hastert and I will have a meeting here at the district regarding the renewal programs for your property and liability insurance portfolio. Currently, the district uses Thomas McGee, LC, they're here in Kansas City, as the broker, and they're also the third-party administrator for the liability claims that the district may have. The reason the district has a third-party administrator is that the district has assumed a fairly high retention for their liability claims. Currently, it's $150,000 per claim. There's some technical issues regarding that policy, regarding how the deductible works, and I have indications already, just received them about 4:30 today, and the property looks very good for the renewal. The rate did go up a little bit. Of course, the values of the district property has gone up close to $450 million worth of property. The liability program, like I said, actually is only going to go up about 3%, no more than, even though you increased about 8% of your student population, which is a factor in how the rating occurs. But we're going to look at a retention option for you all to consider, and we're going to outline that for you in the board packet for your consideration. But it is important that you all make a decision later this month, because it is a July 1 renewal date, and it doesn't take them long to bind coverage. I can bind it over the phone, but a decision will need to be made before July 1st. And again, we have a meeting Tuesday morning with the Thomas McGee representatives, Merle and myself, to go over the options. We did ask them to solicit competitive options, just as an FYI, on the boiler and property program. And based on the current rates, we had 4 declinations. They can't compete. If you may recall, 3 years ago, we changed and saved a lot of money, and they've maintained a very competitive rate on your program. And so I think we have good news to share with you all, and again, we're going to hammer those things out, and I have a preliminary draft here is all, but we want to really outline that for you so you can have all that information available to you for your decision before July 1st. The other issue, I don't have all the data here. I did get some preliminary information regarding the renewal for your workers' compensation third-party administration program. The district is a self-funded entity regarding their workers' compensation risk. That renewal is also July 1st. I have actually worked with your workers' comp coordinator and have received the renewal proposal as far as conversation what their rate will be, and there is a small increase in that. We did go back and negotiate it down, and the reason we did is that we've had a lot more claims this year. It is up. Actually, the dollars are less, but the number of claims are a little higher. And the way a third-party administrator works is that they actually charge on a per-claim basis. And since we have more what we call medical-only claims, people go get maybe a stitch or a look at the doctor, there's no lost time to be paid, so the administration of that is not real extensive. And so we've asked them to go back, and they did go back, and then they lowered their proposal for your consideration. And I'm going to have to bow out a little bit. I don't know about the excess stop-loss program. I understand it did come back favorable, and that's required by the state, and that stops our loss at a certain given level for workers' compensation claims. And again, Thomas McGee handles that as well. I prefer it that way. Personally, I want the individual that handles the claims also be responsible for reporting to our excess community, our excess stop-loss insurer, and they have done that. And they do it at a reduced commission level as well. So that's what you will be seeing in your packet for later this month. Now, are there any specifics that you have at this time? I know that we have a few new board members that haven't gone through this process before. But hopefully it'll be laid out for you.
Comes upon us quick, doesn't it?
Merle Hastert is the one that actually handles it, so I kind of stole his thunder. Do you have anything else? Okay.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Appreciate it. Okay, questions on the other items, boundaries, naming elementary, budget development, student trips, curriculum, textbooks, any other pieces you want to talk about? Ms. Ashley?
I just wanted to mention that Jim Houghton and I have been in conversation the last few days in regard to naming elementary 32. And I guess that the name that's kind of been given to it by another entity is Heather Ridge. And I expressed to Jim my concern about having another Heather, since we already have Heather Stone. So
A whole
Jim
bunch
and-
of ridges,
Excuse me?
and a whole bunch of ridges.
So Jim and I have been looking at some other options that we can present at the next board meeting. We looked at street names and other subdivision names, but we just felt, I felt that it would be too confusing to have Heather Ridge and Heather Stone for elementary schools.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Ashley. Appreciate that. Okay, not seeing no other discussion on these items. Let's move to the next page, informational items. Again, these are written reports that you received on a variety of topics. You've had an opportunity to ask questions about them prior to this meeting, but there's certainly opportunity to look at them now. So receive these reports, math course sequence, career cruising, curriculum development, site council report on TLC. Anybody questions? Seeing none, we have an opportunity now to go to an executive session.
For how long?
Well, I think probably about 60 minutes, Dr. All, to begin with at least.
That's what.
Dr. Drummond, I would move to recess to executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect the privacy interests of the individual to be discussed, and to consult with attorney on matters deemed privileged in attorney-client relationship to protect attorney-client privilege and the public interest, to return to regular session at 10:30 p.m.
Thank you. Do we have a second to this motion?
I second it.
Motion by Mr. Gilmore, second by Ms. Ashley to recess to executive session to return at 10:30. Ms. Carpenter?
Dr. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore?
Yes.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Poland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilhelm?
Yes.
Ms. Ashley?
Yes.
Mr. Churchman?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll recess until 10:30.